Welcome to today's webcast, where we will talk about customer experience and how to sustain the focus on the customer, not only in good times, but as also in challenging times as we go through now. My speaker, Ian Golding, is here with us. Welcome,
It's
Ian.
lovely to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. My name is Demet Tunç. I lead the Customer Experience Council at the Conference Board, which is a peer networking group consisting of senior executives who are working and leading customer experience for their organizations. Before we go into the content, let me give you a couple of tips about joining this webcast. We want this webcast to be as engaging, as interactive as possible in a virtual format. To be able to do so, you can participate with your questions, with your comments, by typing in at the lower left of your screen in the chat box. You can ask questions anytime to Ian and myself. You can also download the presentation. You can full screen the video, the presentation if you wish to do so. Also, we would be happy if you share this webcast within your network who might have an interest in sustaining the focus in customer centricity. These are all about the tips about the webcast. And one more thing, you can also earn CP and CPD credits by listening to this webcast. To be able to do so, you need to type in your email and your name throughout the webcast, which will appear 3 times. Okay, thank you for joining us today. Ian Golding, for me, he is the expert in customer experience. I have attended some of his master classes, which were really memorable. Ian is the first person in the world that was authorized by the Customer Experience Professional Association. He's a certified CCXP person. He is an advisor. He's a columnist at Customer Think, which is an online platform that receives thousands of viewers in a month. He has published several articles. I follow him closely on his blog on LinkedIn with his articles. And he has also published a book in 2018, which the name of the book is Customer What? Which is an interesting title that provokes people to read it. Currently Ian works as an independent consultant. He has clients across all the industries where he helps them to develop frameworks, to develop customer strategies to grow further in the business. Before that, he has almost 20 years of experience, having worked in organizations such as the Royal Bank of Scotland, GE Commercial Finance, and so on. And he has developed and deployed the customer experience strategy for one of Europe's largest online retailers, which is ShopDirect. I believe that site is now going up the hill, and probably it's very successful. So thank you, Ian. It's great to have you here with us. We are in a virtual environment, and okay, Ian is back. I hope there are not going to be any technical issues.
But I am here.
Okay, that's good. All right, so customer centricity is a very broad terminology, Ian. I know that you will elaborate about it, where it's about customer service, where it's about customer experience, and even in good times, in successful times for the organizations, it is quite hard to keep the focus on the customer. So I am wondering how the organizations are coping up with the current situation, where it is very volatile, we are all in a pandemic situation, and I believe it is not that simple and straightforward for the organizations to keep the focus on the customer. So what do you think
Thank you
about
so
that?
much, Demet. And apologies, for some reason my webcam has decided to stop working just at the time that we are starting. But maybe not seeing my radio face is not such a bad thing for people. But hopefully we'll be able to get the webcam to rework. I will keep working on.
Well, Ian, we have your picture on the screen, so it's just that your mouth is not moving, but the rest looks good.
That's a good thing. Thank you so much, Demet, and thank you so much for the very kind welcome and for talking through my background. It is a real pleasure to spend the time with you and members of the conference board and people who are joining this webinar or listening to this webinar to talk about customer experience in a very unusual time, as you rightly say, because customer experience is something that I and many of my peers, other customer experience professionals, have been working incredibly hard to establish within organizations around the world. And it is hard enough trying to get the focus on customer experience in so-called normal times. But when we are in a crisis like this, where there is so much strain, noise, and pressure being applied to organizations, it makes that focus on customer experience potentially even harder. So I'd actually be interested to know from those who are listening in to the webinar today, just to see, ask a first question, if that's okay, if we can put a poll for those who are listening, because I would be interested to know in your organisation, and this is obviously anonymous, so we won't know who your organisation is customer experience currently in the top 3 leadership considerations for your organisation right now? Because what I can share with you before I talk to you about the how can we ensure that there is a sustained focus on customer experience? Many organizations actually have realized through the crisis that the focus on customer experience needs to become amplified. It becomes even more important. But I argue that it should always be one of these top 3 leadership considerations, not just in a crisis. And while people are thinking about this, just to share one of my irritations, it is a big irritation of mine, is that over the last month, I have received more emails in my inbox from CEOs than I have in the remainder of my 47 years on this earth. Okay, why is it only now, in a time of crisis, that CEOs are actually taking the time to email us directly themselves? Why have they not been doing that forever? Why is it only now that they will dare to put their name at the bottom of an email saying what's happening in their organization? Customer experience is something that an organization needs to focus on in the long term, whether times are good or challenging, not just now, because all that shows is a level of insincerity. And so it's really important that I can share some things with you today that will allow you to see that being able to maintain the focus on customer experience in good and bad times is absolutely possible. And I want to show you how to do it. So, the majority listening to the call have said yes, it is in the top 3 considerations, and that's a good thing. But the fact that there might be even one company that isn't thinking about customer experience is a concern. So let me share some things with you. The first thing I just want to clarify is a little bit of language, a little bit of background theory and concept, if you like. I'm not going to overdo the theory because you don't need me to. but the world is still very confused by language when it comes to customer experience. And at times like this, it's important that the language is understood. The three terms that you see on the screen are the three most commonly used terms in businesses today to describe the relationship with the customer. Customer service, customer experience, and customer centricity. However, many organizations are still confused about these terms. Many are using customer service and customer experience interchangeably with each other, almost believing that they are the same thing, which they're not. Customer service is not the same thing as the experience. It is one element of the experience that an organization delivers to its customers in exactly the same way that sales is, that marketing is, that product development is, that logistics is, that everything is. What is vitally important now and always is for organizations to understand that everything the organization does, every single employee contributes to the delivery of the customer experience in some way. And just recognizing that is a good thing, but it is not the aspiration when it comes to embedding customer experience into the way your organization works. Because improving the customer experience is important, but for the customer experience to deliver sustainable growth, to deliver the financial effect that an organization wants by being customer focused, it must be improving the experience within a customer-centric environment. Customer centricity and customer experience are not the same thing. A customer-centric organization is one that enables its people to think and act in the interests of the customer every time it does anything. That's what it means to be customer-centric. And no one needs me to tell them that much of the time that is not what organizations are doing. Much of the time what organizations are doing is thinking and acting in the interests of the business, not the customer. To be customer-centric, we must change the nature of the way organizations think. That being said, it is important to understand how to improve the experience within that environment. And all experiences are constructed of these three component parts. And it's so important now, but always, for organizations to understand this. The functional component of the experience represents your products and your services. This is the only one of the three component parts that customers take as given. In other words, they just expect your product or service to do what your customer says what you tell your customer it's going to do. This is why it has become very difficult, if not impossible, for an organization to differentiate itself on that functional component alone. Because unless that functional component is completely unique to you, no one else does it, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to differentiate on it. Just to give you an example, one industry that has relied on the differentiation of product to make money is the pharmaceutical industry. For most of its existence, the pharmaceutical industry has seen money literally fall out of the sky, because all the industry has had to do is develop a new product, protect it with a patent which usually lasts 20 years, and all they've had to do is walk into a doctor's surgery and ask the doctor, how many do you want? And they don't have to be nice about it, because the doctor doesn't have a choice, because they cannot get that product anywhere else. The problem for that industry is that all of the patents have run out. The days of developing blockbuster products that can be protected for 20 years have gone. It's not as easy to do that anymore. And it's one of the reasons why the accessible component has become increasingly important. The accessible component represents how easy is it for your customer to interact with your product and service. And what many pharmaceutical companies have had to do, in a world where anyone can make their products now, is determine how they can make it easier for customers to get to it. The poster child, as I like to call them, of the accessible experience is Amazon. Because, as we all know, in the markets where Amazon operate, they have made the experience so accessible that many consumers no longer even bother looking anywhere else. And what's fascinating about Amazon is that they sell nothing that's unique. They sell exactly the same stuff as everyone else. It's not the products that differentiate them, it's how easy they've made it. And that has been hugely to their benefit over the last few years, but in the current crisis, even more so. Because they focused so much on accessibility, they are still able to get products to customers despite what's happening around the world. And we're starting to see that organizations who focused on accessibility of the experience are managing to successfully sustain themselves right now, whereas those who didn't invest in technology to improve the experience are now struggling to be able to do so. However, whilst you cannot have an experience without the functional and the accessible, it is actually the third component that's the most important of the three, because the emotional component represents the way the experience makes your customer feel. And the reason that the emotional component is the most important one is because the way the experience makes your customer feel is what they are most likely to remember. And customers will remember one of three things from every interaction they have with an organization. They will remember very good things, they will remember very bad things, or they will remember nothing at all. And that third outcome, remembering nothing at all, is by far and away the worst of the three outcomes, because it means there is no emotional connection between you and your customer. And when you think about the current situation, this is even more important than ever before, because customers who are remembering the way you're dealing with this situation for the wrong reason are extremely unlikely to forget it. In fact, I can guarantee they almost certainly will not forget it. And that will come back to bite you when things return to whatever normal will happen to look like in the future. But it's also important to recognise that customers will remember the good things. Many organisations are going above and beyond at the moment to improve the accessibility of their products and services to help people. Many fintech companies have made the decision to make access to their platforms free for a short period of time. I was only looking at one this morning. I deliver masterclasses, as Demet said, and I needed to have multiple people mapping customer journeys at the same time. And I used a tool called Mural, which you may or may not have heard of. It's a collaboration tool. That is normally a chargeable technology, but they've made the tool free for 90 days because they know how important it is for companies to be able to collaborate with each other. That is something that people will remember for the right reason. So what you need to ask yourselves is, what are your customers remembering about their experience with your organization? Not just now, but in normal times as well. Are they remembering the experience for the right reason? Are they remembering it for the wrong reason? Or are they remembering nothing at all? Because if they're remembering nothing at all, the danger of that is that there's no emotional connection between you and your customer. And so the next time they choose to do something, previous experiences are unlikely to influence what they do.
I would like to pause here, Ian. I would like to remind the audience that they can ask questions through the chat box that appears at the bottom left of the screen. I also have a question. We are going through a very unique period of time at the moment. It's a very volatile and dynamic world. There's no question about agility. People need to be, the organizations, the companies need to be agile. They need to come up with innovative solutions. They are probably becoming more digital than ever because they have to compete. And what the experience was yesterday is not going to be what the consumers, the customers will think tomorrow. So everybody is now talking about the next normal. I think that's a terminology that will come to our lives. What is the next normal, where nobody is able to guess? But in a world like this, who do you think will be able to win in terms of maintaining a good experience in a very volatile, dynamic, and unpredictable world?
Without question, the word that always springs to mind is agility. What I'm starting to see, if I give an example, one of my clients is a bank in Eastern Europe, and they told me yesterday that as a result of the current situation, they have developed digital solutions in 5 days, but for solutions that have been priorities for the last 3 years. And it's been on a prioritization for 3 years, and they've never managed to make it happen. Now there's a crisis, it's taken them 5 days to make it happen. I think those organizations that are able to stop doing unnecessary things, to refocus, reprioritize on what is important to the customer, and then drive change in an agile way, they are the ones who will win. There is no doubt whatsoever. Because what I think this crisis is demonstrating is many organizations have stopped lots of things. But how many of those things were not necessary in the first place? And I think there is a real opportunity as we come out the other end of this to not just go back to normal, not just bring everything back that we had before, but to think, what do our people need? Not just what do our customers need, but what do our employees need? Because by taking away a lot of the unnecessary activity, it is giving our people the ability to focus on what's important. And that's why we can see agile change happening more quickly.
And also throughout this time, all the customer needs will change. Their behaviors will also change. That the organizations need to come up with innovative solutions to respond to those changes in a very agile way. So actually, as you rightly said, there are opportunities for many businesses to win in a pandemic situation like this.
And there are other things that I'm going to share that will elaborate on what you've just suggested. Because ultimately, the reality of customer experience transformation, if I call it that, and I talk about transformation now as if there wasn't a crisis. So if we go back 3 months ago, or maybe let's go back 6 months, when no one would have envisaged the situation we are in now, the challenge for an organization wanting to focus on the customer experience was to be able to go from a situation of where they are today, differentiating themselves on products and services, to a situation where they can differentiate themselves on the whole customer experience. What you see on the screen is what I call the customer experience continuum. And every organization on earth sits somewhere on this line. The majority are sitting on the left-hand side, delivering what we call random or unexpected experiences. This is the overwhelming majority of legacy organizations in the world today. And the reason why experiences are random, what that means is that customers never quite know what's going to happen, is because legacy businesses were created to focus on selling as many products and services as possible. And so employees within these organizations are focused on processes, tasks, and products. People with their heads down doing lots of stuff, as I rudely describe it. And so they're measuring lots of people doing lots of stuff, even the things that are going wrong that shouldn't be going wrong in the first place. And a massive irony of customer experience only becoming commonplace in the language of business in recent times is that most organizations in normal times are focused on cutting cost and becoming more efficient. But what they're failing to understand is that the biggest source of wasted cost in most businesses today is down to the fact that they are delivering random experiences in the first place. Every time something goes wrong, it costs money. Every time a customer has to contact you unnecessarily, it costs money. And during this crisis, finances are being stretched in ways we could never imagine. If organizations want to become leaner and more efficient, just firing people is not going to achieve that. What they need to do is to eliminate the randomness in the customer journey. Stop things from going wrong. Refocus on the things that make the difference. Because ultimately, if an organization is going to be able to become customer-centric and get to the right-hand side of this continuum, it needs to know what it wants the experience to be in the first place. And if it wants to deliver an intentional experience, an experience it wants its customers to have, it must embed a shared vision that is what needs to happen. I'm very pleased to see that customer experience is one of the top 3 priorities for the majority of the people watching this webinar. I'm delighted to see that because everyone in their organizations needs to see this as a priority. Yes, Demet.
Ian, I think the challenge here is to build and maintain a relationship in a differentiated way with the consumer, with the customer that you actually will never be able to meet. Or repair a device that you cannot touch or see. So how will that be possible for the organizations? I think this is, I think the answer would be different between the industries, and it would also be variable B2B versus B2C.
Yes, without question, and variable between industry. Whether it be manufacturing, financial services, everyone is going to have to adapt in some way. But it may mean organizations having to do things that they would not normally do. The challenge is that because most organizations are delivering random experiences right now as a legacy, what that means is that most employees in most legacy businesses are doing what they're told. That means that they don't think. It means that they just perform the task they've been asked to do. To even dream of becoming customer-centric, to differentiate on the experience, we need to go from people doing what they're told to people thinking and acting in the interests of the customer. Now that is a difficult thing to do, because to change the way people are thinking, many people in organizations don't think because they don't think they're allowed to. In some cases, employees don't think because they're scared of the consequences. Recently, I say recently, in December last year, an employee of a bank in the US was fired for doing the right thing for a customer. She actually gave a customer her own money because the customer couldn't get any money on Christmas Eve and he didn't have a cent to his name. And so she drove to meet him and gave him money of her own to keep him going over Christmas. And she was fired for doing that. And when it went into the media and it went viral, the bank concerned had such a terrible lashback that they then tried to re-recruit her. But she didn't want to go back to join them. You know, if we do not give people the ability to think, we cannot create an experience that the customer is going to remember for the right reason. And that is the same in normal times, let alone a crisis like this. So what we need to know is the things that are underneath the intentional part of this continuum. We need to give people the ability to think right now, and we need to give them the ability to think so they can take more accountability as things are going wrong, because that's going to keep happening. And we need to be measuring not just internal KPIs, we need to be measuring how the employees are feeling and how the customer is feeling. But the most important thing of all, to deliver a customer experience that is going to differentiate and sustain a business, is we must create good cross-functional governance. It is critical right now that organisations are working together. And most organisations operate in silos. Okay? They operate in silos, and it's becoming very difficult, if not impossible, to break the walls that sit between functions. So a question I'd like to ask the audience, if that's possible, is, do you see right now your organisation coming together to work together to achieve not just the desired experience, the experience you want your customers to have, but to take the organisation together through this crisis? Has this crisis broken down walls and silos, or are those walls and silos still existing? I'll be very interested to see what your responses to that question would be.
Okay, let me repeat the question. Ian is asking to the audience if you see this crisis breaking the silos and bringing the organization together in a unified way and deliver the desired experience for the company. We will be waiting for your responses. I will wait for a couple of responses and let Ian know when we get more responses, and you can continue in the
So brilliant. Thank you very much, Demet. And I've already had a sneaky peek actually at the first response from Valerie, and it's wonderful actually to see that is happening. But I won't peek at anything else. I shall continue. But because ultimately, if we're going to break down the silos, work together, organisations need to understand that we need to align three layers that enable the experience to come to life. The top layer are your customer journeys. Every organisation has a customer journey. It represents what your customers are interacting with every day. But in many cases, it's only in recent times that journey has become something that is understood. The second layer are business processes, representing what people are doing every day. Unlike customer journeys, businesses have been aware of business process for decades. The problem with business processes is that most organisations created them and implemented them without knowing there is a customer journey. And so if you try to underpin the customer journey with everything people are doing every day, businesses have a realisation that they're not aligned. There are people doing things every day that will never have any impact on the customer at all. And we have to ask ourselves, why are they doing it then? There are processes crossing over each other. There's duplication. There are gaps where nothing happens to the customer. Not because we have bad people, but because we are working in a world where those processes were put in place without knowing what the journey was. And it gets even worse when we get to the third layer, the technology layer. Because like process, most organizations bought, designed, and implemented technology without knowing what the customer journey was. And so much of the time, businesses bought technology, forced processes into it, and customers got whatever they got. The biggest danger right now, because organizations see technology as the answer to this current crisis, the danger is that that technology is forced in too quickly without understanding the customer journey. Because if you force technology in too quickly, what happens is you put the technology in place, you force processes into it, and then customers get whatever they get. Right now, it is critical that businesses are understanding what the journey looks like so they can better align processes, what people are doing to the journey, stopping the things that are having no effect on the customer and ensuring there is alignment, and then recognizing where technology can better help the process to do what the customer needs it to do. So Demet, I don't know, have you had any responses to those questions?
Yeah, we have many responses actually. Many people see this as a positive thing because it's breaking the silos and it's helping the organizations to be more agile. And somebody says that it's not only externally, but also internally, they see that the change is happening in a positive way. And one respondent says that, yes, they see this happening, the positive change, but not for all brands, for some brands. I would be interested to understand why.
Question. I don't know if that person is prepared to share that. But you know, the fact that we're seeing that it takes a time of crisis to break down the divisions, you know, the people working against each other, you know, that is a huge positive. But the important thing is, can that be sustained when things go back to normal, if that ever happens indeed? Because what we're demonstrating now is that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Whenever there is a crisis, people tend to down tools and come together for the greater good of the organization, of the employees and the customer. And that's the mentality that we need to keep thinking forever, not just at times of crisis. And it's funny, obviously I'm from the UK, I am British, and what this crisis demonstrates in the UK is what people like to call the classic British spirit. You know, everyone's coming together and working together, you know, but why does it take this kind of thing for that to happen? If we're thinking, and it comes back to that word think again, if we're thinking and acting in the interests of the customer, we need this kind of spirit to be maintained and sustained in the long term. And how can we best do that? This is a very nice segue for me, switching to the how can we do it. Because unfortunately, creating a sustainably customer-centric culture is not easy, and it's difficult to sustain the focus because there are so many competing priorities, competing objectives constantly coming in to an organization. And so I want to talk to you about the importance, the importance of having structure and rigor to make the management of the experience intentional. Most organizations around the world that talk about customer experience are doing it in some way, but most of them are delivering customer experiences by accident. It is a very strange expression, but an expression that represents that many organizations are relying on the goodwill of their people to know what to do and how to treat the customer in whatever situation they face. The problem with that is that we cannot rely on the goodwill of our people, because some people naturally are very empathetic and very knowledgeable and know what to do, and others aren't. And this is what leads to experiences being random, because every time we interact with a different person, we are quite possibly going to have a different experience. To change that, we need to make the experience intentional. And to do that, we need a way of making the customer experience something that has structure and rigor. A question that I personally am often asked by businesses around the world: do I need a framework to make the management of customer experience intentional? And as you can see, there is only one very simple answer to that question. Right now, organizations who have a structured approach to managing the customer experience will be continuing to use that structured approach to manage their way through this situation. They are not having to suddenly start from scratch saying, right, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? They already know what to do. They've already known for a long time what to do, because the structured, intentional approach to customer experience has always been there.
And is there a framework that
you read my mind?
All sizes?
If you Google customer experience framework, you'll see lots of pretty pictures flashing up on the screen in front of you, like the pictures that you now see on the screen. The answer to your question, Demet, is that there is no one standard framework. But the fact that you will find so many when you search on Google, other search engines are available, obviously. The fact that you will find so many is representative of the fact that more and more organizations are using them. The reason that so many are using them is because they recognize that what a framework enables you to do is focus. And right now, that ability to focus is needed more than ever before. So I want to share with everyone 2 examples of different types of framework. I want to share a form of framework that has become the most commonly used form of framework in the world today, before sharing a simpler framework with you that I use to share knowledge with people all around the world. The first framework I'm going to share with you is known as a maturity model, a customer experience maturity model. And the example I'm going to share with you is an example created by Forrester. This is just one of many maturity models that exist. And I don't necessarily endorse Forrester, but this model is as simple as any other, and is a perfect example of what we mean by a framework in the form of a maturity model. What you can see is that Forrester have identified 6 disciplines that they define an organization needs to embed into itself to the point that it becomes systemic. And by doing that, they will create a sustainably customer-centric organization. Now, just a couple of points of language. The Forrester describe these things as disciplines. Others will call them competencies. It doesn't matter how you describe them. The point is that what Forrester are saying is that those disciplines must be embedded into the way we work. Embedded into the way we work so they happen automatically. It doesn't require an irritant like me to be bashing people over the head, trying to get them to focus on the customer. That focus on the customer just becomes inherent in everything that happens, because these disciplines live and breathe systemically. The problem is that many organizations, when they look at these disciplines, they have the realization that a lot of them do exist. They are doing things related to these disciplines, but much of what they are doing is ad hoc. It happens from time to time. Some organisations will realise that they are not doing these things at all. It is only when these disciplines are embedded to the point that they happen automatically that we are able to sustain the focus on customer experience that leads to sustainable growth. But I want to share a simpler example with you. A simpler example to just take this to another level of detail. 8 years ago, I created a very simple, generic customer experience framework to help people understand this concept. As you can see, my framework contains 3 parts to it: strategy, measurement, and people. The reason I display the 3 parts of this framework as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle is because a jigsaw puzzle is the perfect analogy for customer experience. Because when you think about a jigsaw puzzle, when you build a jigsaw, the first thing you need to do is to find the pieces of the jigsaw. When you think about the disciplines behind the model that Forrester created, each of those disciplines are different pieces of the puzzle. And your organisations are extremely likely to already have some of those pieces. That's a great thing, because you don't need to recreate them. But the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle means that just having the pieces in isolation of each other doesn't help you, because it's only when you're able to put the pieces together that you end up seeing the picture. You end up seeing what the experience actually looks like. And by piecing them together, you then determine if there are any pieces missing, because there's nothing more frustrating than building a puzzle and getting to the end and realizing that there are missing pieces. But the other reason for the jigsaw analogy is that where you start in building a framework will differ from organisation to organisation. Every business is different, which means that the starting point is different. And if I gave 100 people the same jigsaw puzzle, all 100 people would start building the jigsaw in a different place. That's the reality of customer experience. Let me take this to the next level, and this will help me to bring the webinar to a conclusion so I can allow Demet to grill me in whatever way she would like to. If I take each of those pieces of the jigsaw to the next level of detail, the strategy part of the framework is 3 questions. 3, in principle, remarkably simple questions. Do you know who your customers are? Do you know what you want their experience to be? And does everyone in your organisation know the role they play in delivering that experience? Whilst they are 3 incredibly simple questions, I can tell you now that most organisations can't answer them. If we think about the question, do we know who our customers are? If I crudely pick on the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm being crude because not every company is like I'm going to describe. But if you ask a pharmaceutical company, who are your customers? It is not uncommon to get the response that our customers are the patient. But if you then say, well, do you sell your products directly to the patient? The response will be, oh, no, we have to go through healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, consultants. Right. So are your customers the patient or the healthcare professionals? Oh, that's a good point. And what about, do you sell your products directly to the healthcare professionals? Oh, no. We've got to go through, a healthcare authority, an association. So are your customers the patient, the healthcare professionals, or the authority? And you start to realise that question, do we know who our customers are, is not as simple as it seems. And if we don't know who the customer is, or we don't have clarity, the likelihood that a strategy has been created to define how we want those customers to feel every time they interact with us, that is not going to exist. And if we don't have that strategy, how can we expect our people to know what it is that they're supposed to do to leave customers feeling a way that we've never defined. I am being intentionally brutal in the way I'm describing this. But many organisations can't answer those questions, which makes it very difficult when you get to the second part of the framework, the bit we call measurement or the facts. This is where that thing called the customer journey comes in, because whether an organisation knows it or not, it is the customer journey that is bringing the experience to life right now, whether that experience has been defined or not. And this middle part of the framework is all concerned with creating and adopting a continuous, never-ending cycle of interconnected activities that we call customer journey management, which includes knowing who the customer is, which comes from the strategy part of the framework, so we can determine what their journey looks like, so we can measure that journey to identify the small number of priorities having the greatest detrimental effect on customer perception and financial performance. And when we know what the priorities are, we then fix them. And then we go around that cycle all over again and all over again and all over again forever. But as we've been discussing, you can't do any of this without the third part of the framework, because the third part of the framework is all about people. And that part of the framework is all concerned with creating a culture, an environment that enables your people to think and act in the interests of the customer every time you do anything. If in the explanation, the description of that framework, you are thinking to yourself, we've got some of those things, there are some things that are missing, but we're not bringing all of that together, then that is telling you that you may not have the structured approach to the customer experiences you need. Additionally, I would also like to just allow you to consider whether or not you know who is accountable for these things in your organisation. Because not only do we need structure, we need accountability for that structure. We need to know who is accountable and who is responsible for doing these things. If that structure, supported by the right governance and accountability, is put in place, that is when you will be able to intentionally manage the experience and ultimately achieve a sustained focus on customer experience in the long term. I shall pause for breath and pass back to Demet to see if you've got any questions for me.
Thank you, Ian. I would like the audience to pose some questions if they have any. You can type in your question on the chat box, which appears at the left bottom of your screen. Ian, I know the Forrester framework, and I also see your framework, which looks quite simple, but for me, I don't think it is as simple as it sounds. I think it's still very complicated because, as you rightly said, every customer experience is different. And in a world that we are going through at the moment, many things need to be customized. And to make things customized, I think the data plays a very important part here. The measurement plays the most important part here. If you read the data, if you interpret it correctly, then that means that you will be able to customize your services, your products, your solutions for your customers, which is not that simple and straightforward, I would say.
It's a very consulting response to what you've just said, but it depends. What I'm seeing is that many organizations who do have a customer-centric approach are adapting the way they're measuring the experience. For example, many have stopped capturing feedback from customers in the way that they would normally do. The most commonly used feedback mechanism is Net Promoter Score, but asking customers, would you recommend at a time like this, doesn't really seem appropriate. And so many organizations have stopped asking that question. But instead of asking that question, they're focusing on something that's more important, such as customer effort. How easy is it for you to interact with us? Which right now is the most important thing, because making sure that you are able to access what you need is really, really important. And so you're right, it's not always that easy, but if you've got a framework in place, it means there is accountability there, and there is the structure to start asking, what do we need to do differently? If we're going to put an app in place to make it easier for our customer, is that going to have the right effect on the journey or not? Rather than just going into this blindly, reacting, doing whatever you can, hoping that something's going to work. Customer experience is a fact-based methodology, and what we want is to apply this more scientific approach to customer experience to make the right decisions, not just to guess or use gut feel.
Mm-hmm. Ian, we have a couple of minutes left and we have some questions from the audience. What recommendations do you have for defining the customer when you have a franchise business model and you don't actually control the end user experience directly?
I think that is a really good question, a very important question. I think this is where, when we talk about cross-functional collaboration, that collaboration isn't necessarily just within an organization, but it may also be across stakeholders, both within and outside of the organization. I would say that is a very challenging scenario, and I would probably need to understand a little bit more to be able to give you a more informed answer to the question. And so if you want to reach out to me, I'll be very happy to give you a more detailed explanation. But I think it's essential that you have sufficient information from the business that you are franchising from, so you are able to define not just your relationship with that company, but also the relationship and the role you play in it with the end user. Very, very important.
Okay, we have another question. While I'm sure you agree on its interdependence, why don't we mention more employee experience as a starting point to promote customer centricity? If companies are accessible, respond to employees' needs and emotions, they in turn will do the same for the customers and the consumers.
Eugenio,
I fully agree. But I think 1 hour is not enough to go in depth of employee experience and customer experience.
100% correct. And interestingly, over the last 2 years now, there has been a growing trend not to talk about CX first, but to talk about EX first. They are absolutely inextricably linked. It's inferred in my framework, but I actually take it a step further, Eugenio, if you're interested, and I actually talk about the human experience, which encompasses both and more. But you're absolutely right, and it's very important right now that the way we are treating our people is the way they will be treating our customers. And in times of uncertainty, if your people are scared, your employees are worried, that will translate itself to the customer. So you're absolutely right.
I will pose the last question, Ian. Any example of organization taking advantage of the crisis to accelerate the CX program, taking advantage, for instance, of some frontline resources that are now available?
Brilliant questions. A very good question, Valerie. And I would say that I haven't yet heard any stories of organizations doing what you're describing, other than there has been an increase in the desire to share knowledge. And about 50% of my time, I'm sharing knowledge with people. That there is, I think, an opportunity to use this time to make sure that people are better informed, better trained, so that they are able to take the science of customer experience and apply it. I'm sure there probably are examples of organizations who are taking advantage of this, but I just haven't been told about them yet. But I'm sure I will discover them over time.
Okay, I'll take the last question. And if there are more questions, please send them to us and we can respond to you by email. We can follow that up. What can HR as a profession learn from your practice? Backing up Eugenio's
Again, John,
point on
another
employee
brilliant question.
experience.
And the way I'll answer that is to use the word attitude. I said that every single employee, every function has a part to play in the delivery of the experience, and HR are just as important as anyone else. And the most important thing in the long term for customer experience is that too many organizations are still recruiting for technical competence. But if we want to build customer-centric organizations, just bringing people in that know how to do the job doesn't necessarily mean that we're bringing people in who care about people, believe in our purpose, and want to do the right thing for the organization, the customer, and the shareholder. And what we need are more organizations led by HR to be changing the way we recruit, to be absolutely focused on attitude as much, even if not more so, than technical competence. That's in knowing that we've got to the end of the time. That's my quick response to what you've said. There is more I could probably tell you, John, though.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Ian, and thanks a lot to the audience for their engagement and participation. As I said at the start, I lead the Customer Experience Council, which is a peer networking group. If you're interested in these kind of topics, we would be happy to welcome you in our council. Just spend another 30 seconds to fill in this evaluation so that we improve ourselves further for the future webcasts. And again, Ian, thank you. It's great to have you with us, and I look forward to our next webcast.
See me. But as I say, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But next time I'll make sure that the camera. I don't know why the camera didn't work, but it's been a pleasure being able to chat with you, Demet, and to share this with the conference board. And I hope that we can do this again sometime soon.
We will. Thanks again. Have a good day.